Hello and welcome to the Agape Guys show. I gotta tell you, I'm excited about this episode. I'm going to talk about the things that happened in my life right after I surrendered myself and my life to God and His love. Last time on the show, I talked about the things that happened in my life that led me to learn about God's love. I said the sinner's prayer as a child, and I learned a lot of theology as an adult, but then I had difficulty with abusive church leaders. Those situations led to my departure from several church groups in the 1990s and early 2000s. This also led to a lot of deep and severe depression. Then, through what I considered to be a miraculous set of dreams, I was told to leave the abusive church I was attending. I ended up going to another church where some folks taught me about God's love. I learned about God's love over a few months at the beginning of 2004. I then had some big arguments with God, which led me to surrender myself and my life to Him and His love. This made such a big change in my behavior that people told me it was like I was a totally different person. I know that before this time I had been acting like a religious snob. I thought it was my duty to correct other people's theological beliefs when I saw the least little thing I didn't think was right, or I thought that they got wrong. Yet now I had stopped correcting people's beliefs and talking down to people. I was now able to show other people genuine love and kindness. If you didn't see the last episode, you might want to go back and watch it so you can catch up on all the details. That's where I stopped with my story in the last episode, but that definitely wasn't the end of the story. There's still a lot more to the story, and there's a lot of other things I learned along the way. So let's pick up there, and I'll let you know what happened after I learned about God's love. Well, the people at the church group I attended had started to see the big change in my behavior. A couple weeks later, the people who taught me about God's love asked me a very serious question. We had just attended a church service, and as we went outside for some fresh air, they asked me a question. They said, "Did all that theological knowledge that you have help you learn about God's love or help you surrender to it?" I thought about it a few seconds, but I had to admit that, in all humility, it hadn't helped me at all. It hadn't helped me to understand God's love or help me surrender to it so God could make a change in my life. I thought more about that question, and it made a big impression on me. It caused me to move away from deep theological discussions and debating theology and different ideologies. Some people might say that we shouldn't give up critical thinking because we don't want to allow abusive people to manipulate us, control us, or act abusive towards us. I can understand that, but we also don't want to get so wrapped up in studying theology that we fall into a trap. The trap is something like the Apostle Paul mentioned. He showed that knowledge puffs us up and makes us arrogant. Yet love builds us up. We do need to recognize when people are being abusive and walk away from those circumstances, so I understand that too. Yet we need to make sure we don't get arrogant or become unloving or start talking down to people. As 1 Corinthians 13 shows, if we have all knowledge but don't have love, we are only making an annoying, loud noise. Maybe I'll talk some more about that in another episode. As time went by, the church leaders in that church group showed that they didn't believe in God's love, and they started to get abusive. They were harsh toward me and several of my friends who believed in God's love. The situation seemed to get worse over time. I think people were getting tired of the abuse and the church leaders refusing to learn. People and families started leaving almost every other week. A year later, half the people I knew had left. Another year later, and 3/4 of the people I knew had left. Several of us visited other church groups in the area, but we mostly found the same problems in every church group we visited. Most church leaders taught people to live by works. It was obvious that they didn't really believe in God's love and weren't willing to believe in God's love at all. Some even tried to mix God's love with teachings about teaching people to live by works. So it was the typical Galatian error of mixing law and grace. So I grew weary of that really quick, and I just didn't like it. I left those groups and kept looking for other church groups I could attend. I got tired of visiting other churches after a while, and I gave up looking for another church. I just couldn't find one that was believed in God's love. I then went through a lot of books about house church groups and wanted to start one. I tried several times to start a house church group, but all my efforts fizzled out and ended in failure. I never could seem to get one started or get it off the ground or to get it going. I gave up on that after several failures. I then found books about organic church and joined one of those groups, but it ended up being a mess. It was based on books written by a guy that made it popular. Yet when I was with that group, every time I tried to share about God's love, I received verbal and psychological abuse. I started to see more and more people showing just as much verbal and psychological abuse as I saw at some of the troubled institutional church groups I had attended. There was also a strong groupthink mentality in the group, which led to abuse whenever you disagreed with anything the group wanted or believed. Several friends left after they got mistreated, and I eventually left for the same reasons. Now, I don't hold a grudge against those people because life is a journey, and maybe God is still teaching them some things. Who knows? Who knows when they might learn some things that will make a big difference in their lives. Maybe they hadn't learned some of those things yet, like I did, and maybe they might learn them in the future. That's okay. We all learn in different ways, and we all learn at a different pace. Well, as I left that group, I moved back to the area where my parents lived, and I did carpentry and light construction work. I kept reading a lot of books through the next few years. I also watched a lot of videos on YouTube about people like me who saw problems in the institutional church systems and programs. Many of those people had left just like I did. I met a few people in the area where I lived who I shared God's love with, and they appreciated it. As time went by, those folks moved away or moved on in life, and I never saw them again. Then I started seeing videos by Steve McVey, who criticized church systems that ended up in abuse. I agreed with those videos and loved watching them. I felt like I had finally found somebody who was seeing a lot of the same problems I was seeing. As I got into 2017, there were a few big things I learned that opened my eyes to even more things. Several family members acted a bit harsh toward me simply because I believed in God's love, so a counselor recommended the Boundaries book. I loved reading the book, and I implemented what I saw in the book. I sent my parents and siblings a private message and told them I needed to be treated better or I might need to employ some changes. Some family members got even more harsh with me, and one got blocked and another got so upset with me that they blocked me. Some of this smoothed out over the next few years, and the verbal and psychological abuse has stopped for the most part, so it's not a big problem now. Another big thing that hit me in 2017 was when I heard Steve McVey talk about universal reconciliation. I misunderstood him at first, and I thought he said he became a Unitarian and gave up on believing in God and the Bible. Boy, was I wrong. If Steve sees this, or if anybody knows him, just let him know I apologize because I was wrong. But at the time, I got mad at him and stopped watching his videos for a couple of months. And like I said, I was wrong. I later found out that Steve was right. I saw one of his videos a couple months later, and he gave a good defense of universal reconciliation. And hearing that made me start thinking, maybe he was right, and maybe I was wrong about the issue. That same year in 2017, I had a friend tell me to look up Richard Murray's teachings on his website about God's goodness. He told me about his website, which is called thegoodnessofgod.com. I listened to almost all of Richard Murray's recordings that were on the website. I loved listening to those recordings, and it was very eye-opening to listen to what he said. It was a big deal for me to learn about God's goodness and that he isn't mad at anyone. He isn't going around looking for opportunities to punish people for their mistakes and foibles in life. He also showed that many people misinterpreted many passages in the Bible to make it seem like God enjoyed punishing and destroying people. Yet Richard Murray showed that God isn't like that at all. He showed that many of these parts of the Bible are misunderstood and misinterpreted. Many people misinterpret these parts of the Bible to make it seem like God is always angry and always cruel, yet in reality, the Bible showed that God is love and is always kind and gentle. That same friend that told me about Richard Murray also told me that they didn't believe in hell. I had also heard several other friends say that they didn't believe in hell over the previous few years before that. So I wanted to address the issue once and for all. I had gone through a few atheist books and I pointed out their flaws and ideas, and I figured I could do the same thing with this issue. I knew a lot of apologetics and how to defend the faith, so I was going to do the same thing with this issue. I also thought I would find the one book that most hell doubters held to, and I was going to go through it and disprove it and write a book how I proved there really was a hell. I found out the book that most people pointed to was called Hope Beyond Hell by Gary Bocheman. I got the ebook version and a free audiobook version downloaded as well, and I sat down with a pencil and paper to write down every mistake I could find. Yet, as I went through the book, I found the verses were all used in their proper context, and I couldn't dispute those. It was all well-reasoned and reasonable, and it had good logic to it. I then started to notice that I had been proved wrong. I could see where my beliefs in hell was the main foundation of almost all my old Christian beliefs. I could now see all those things come crashing down like a house of cards, except the idea of God's love. That was the only thing that remained. As I saw my beliefs fall apart, I began to literally tremble and quiver due to my frayed nerves and the fact that I was nauseous all day, every day for 2 weeks straight after that. One of the things that made me tremble was that some of my family members already showed harsh behavior toward me. A few family members already acted like they hated me for believing in God's love, so I couldn't tell them how I'd just learned that there wasn't a literal fiery hell with eternal conscious torment. I mean, it would only lead to a never-ending parade of verbal and psychological abuse. The more I thought about the evidence, the more I calmed down, since the evidence seemed quite clear and accurate. So I started to see that maybe there really wasn't a literal fiery hell with eternal conscious torment. A short time later in 2017, I saw Steve McVeigh and a few other people start the World Inclusion Network website. I got on there and heard more people give reasonable evidence for universal reconciliation. I then started to really seriously accept it deep inside my own heart and mind. I also noticed that the people on the World Inclusion Network website seemed to believe the same thing about rejecting the concept of eternal conscious torment in hell. Many of them gave a lot more evidence for rejecting eternal conscious torment. I also noticed that there was this one guy on the website that kept putting up these really great videos that I love to watch. The guy always had a good attitude and spoke with a joyful tone in his voice and always seemed to have a smile. He always started out with a smile and he would say, "Hey everybody, this is Paul Gray." I really loved watching his videos. He had some really great videos. Sometime later, the website closed down and I could no longer find any of the people that were on the World Inclusion Network website. During that time, from about 2019 to 2020, I had a bit of a rough time in my life. It seemed like all my friends and family had rejected the idea of God's love and had rejected me due to my belief in God's love. I thought there was no hope for the world, so I got a bad attitude toward people and toward life in general. Believing that there was no hope for the world, I started praying for God to send a nuclear war to wipe out most of mankind. I then sensed that God didn't seem to be helping me in my life anymore, so I asked God about it. This led me to have another big argument with God, but the Holy Spirit set me straight once again. I think God is loving enough to put up with our tantrums. I also believe He probably already hears a lot of doubts and arguing anyway, and I'm sure He's grown quite accustomed to our human frailties and our limited mind and concepts and thinking abilities. So I think it's okay, and I don't mean to be irreverent toward God or anything, but I was just frustrated with my life and frustrated with just life in general and with other people. I think God can take it, and I still think he still loves us, since his nature and core essence is love. Yet after I asked God why he wasn't helping me, I began to sense the Holy Spirit making a really strong impression in my heart again. I got the answer back that very same day that I asked about it, just a few hours later. As the Spirit made impressions on my heart, it was almost as if the Spirit was saying some specific things. It was as if the Spirit was telling me that it was obvious why I was in this bad situation and bad state of life. It was because I had abandoned God's agape love and was wishing for many people to die. That was the exact opposite of what God really wanted. The Spirit showed me that God loves all people, and he doesn't like to see anyone die or get mistreated. The Spirit further clarified that he didn't want to see people get incinerated in nuclear explosions, get blown up by terrorist bombs, or get poisoned by any kind of biological or chemical weapons. He also clarified that he loves people as if we are all his close and beloved friends. I argued with the Spirit and said, "Yeah, but everybody rejects your love. They even reject the concept that you are loving. I've told many people about your love, and they vehemently reject it and mistreat me for talking about it." The Spirit seemed to nudge my heart once again. It was as if the Spirit said, "Yes, they might often reject my love, and even reject other people that give my love to them, but they still need my love. They are like rebellious teenagers that don't want a hug, and reject the notion that they need a hug. They might even push you away when you try to give them one, but they still need that hug, even if they don't realize it. Sometimes those are the ones that need the hug the most, and they need to be hugged more tightly than most. If they push you or me away, then maybe they need to be allowed to go their own way for a while. However, we should always be willing to love them and treat them with kindness. You never know what they've been through in life that could have hurt them in ways that cause them to stop trusting people, or losing trust in people and thinking that maybe you're hugging them because you're trying to manipulate them or be abusive in some way. We need to always treat them with kindness anyways, no matter what. The Spirit also went further on to say, this kind of love is my agenda, and this love is what my kingdom promotes, and it's what I desire to be done. If you work to the exact opposite of my desires, then why should I help you undo my love and kindness that I freely give to all people? I'll help you if you promote my love, which is what I desire for my kingdom, but I will not help you fight against me. That's why I haven't been helping you or giving you guidance and power. I still love you. However, you've been going down a very dark path that only breeds more and more bad feelings and hatred. That isn't helpful to me, you, or anybody else. Please come back to my love and help me show love to other people, and I'll be glad to work with you and help if you want me to. Well, I was a little embarrassed, to say the least, that I had turned away from loving other people, even though I had learned about God's love. I also realized that it wasn't that God had turned away from me, it was me who turned away from God and his love. Yet he is always just as close as our breath. As I thought about it, I changed my mind at that very moment, right there on the spot. Then, in an instant, really in an instant, the Spirit started working in my life again, and I could sense it. I sensed that the Spirit helped me with a few things that very same day, and over the next few days as well. Then, within a week, I had another dream about an abusive pastor I had known. The dream showed what led him to reject the concept of a loving God and confirmed some of the solutions to that problem. Then, about a week later, I remembered that I had seen two people in life named Paul Gray. I looked up the name on Facebook and found the group Grace to All with Paul Gray. I recognized his pictures and remembered his videos that I enjoyed watching. I clicked on to join the group. 2 weeks after that, I had a dream where I met Paul Gray in what looked like either a church building or a large house. He was standing in a hall next to a set of double doors that were propped open. I walked up to him and told him what I saw on his videos on YouTube. I also told him about how I first learned about God's love. He then told me a little bit more about how he learned about God's love as well. A couple of months later, I had another interesting dream. I was shown something similar to what the author Wayne Jacobson had felt God showing him. I was shown that it was time to go out into the world and interact with other people and simply try to have fun sharing God's love with others. I was also shown that God was going to use His power to make His love spread around the world, except it would now be spread by His power instead of my efforts trying to tell people. He would also use His power to work in my life and in other people's lives to spread His love around the world as well. Then, a week or two later, Paul Gray announced on his Facebook group that he was starting an online group on Sundays where they would all have internet video call on Zoom. This seemed to go right along with the dream that I had just had about interacting with other people around the world and having fun sharing God's love. I contacted Paul Gray through an email, and he sent me a link and told me to join in the call. And I got on the call that very next Sunday, and I've been getting on the Zoom call almost every week since then. I've also watched many videos over the last couple of years from many different people that I've seen other folks recommend, like Dr. C. Baxter Kruger, Brad Jerzak, Steve McVeigh, Paul Young, Richard Murray, Keith Giles, Don Keithley, and many others, and many other podcasts and articles as well. So it's been a long journey where I learned a lot of stuff along the way. Some of the stuff I learned was quite shocking and stunning, yet I made it through and have learned some amazing things. Some of my learning experiences through the years have led to painful experiences, and some have led to some near existential crisis. Sometimes I would tremble, and sometimes I would learn things that were so amazing that it was just totally life-altering. I now feel like I've had so many near existential crises that I've grown accustomed to it. And I've grown accustomed to having one about every 1 or 2 years. At least what I learn now, sometimes these days I don't argue about it as much as I used to. And sometimes if I hear things that I disagree with, I'll just sit there and be like, I'll have to think about that for a while. I used to get mad and try to correct people's theology and argue with them, but I don't do that anymore. That's about the most excited I get, is just to sit there and say, I'll have to think about that for a while. And that pretty much brings me up to the current days. I'm still getting on that Zoom call every Sunday with a group of people. And if you wanted to join that, you could probably join the Facebook group, Grace to All with Paul Gray. Now I'd like to talk to you about something else before I end the show. I've been given a big opportunity to start to have a show on the Grace Awakening Network. A few people told me that I should give this a lot of consideration and try to have a show where I tell people about God's love. So it's going to take a great deal of money to produce a show like this, and I'd like to ask for your help. I live paycheck to paycheck and can't really afford to get on the network at this time. So if you have the financial means to help, I'd like to request that you send a donation to my PayPal account and mark it as support for the Agape Guy show. I just recently put up another part of the PayPal account, so you can go there and click for monthly support, so it will be an automatic monthly withdrawal if that's what you prefer. I'd also say if you can't afford it and you can't hardly afford to get enough money for groceries, then don't worry about it. Yet, if you do have the means, I sure would appreciate the help so we can get this show going. I have received a bit of support, and I appreciate those gifts, yet I need a bit more to get this on the network. I'd also like to let you know something else before I end the show. I have a friend, Ms. Jo Olivia, who recently wrote and recorded a song, and it's on YouTube. I'd recommend that you go listen to it. It's been very encouraging for me to listen to it. The song is her own rendition of the verse in Lamentations 3:22 and 23, where it uses the phrase, "Great is your faithfulness." I'll put a link to it and put the link on my YouTube page and maybe on this website or maybe in the comments section. You should look it up on YouTube. You can look up Jo Olivia. Her name is spelled J-O-E-Olivia. and the last name Olivia is spelled Olivia. The song is called Great Is Your Faithfulness. She mentioned in a social media post that when she was learning some things that were quite tough to understand, it felt like life was falling apart. Yet when she needed God and asked God for help, He seemed to come through. He helps you with what you need to comfort you, to help you sense His love, and to help you learn things He wants you to learn, which is usually about His love. If you have tough times like that, or if you're wondering if God really loves you, I'd challenge you to ask God about it. Ask God to show you that type of love and help you have a better understanding of that type of love. I trust that God can show you that He really loves you. If you start to get better awareness of God's love, then try to just relax into it and enjoy it. Relax into it like it's a comfortable bed which helps you relax and get a good night's sleep so you can feel rejuvenated the next day. That's what I want for every one of you, which is to be able to experience and enjoy God's love. So listen to that song and ask God to help you. As for now, I'll see you in the next episode. Farewell for now.